I knew something was wrong the moment the taxi slowed in front of the house on Maple Avenue. Not because the lights were off, Michael always forgot to leave the porch light on. Not because the front door was shut tight or the shades drawn, Brittany hated open curtains. It wasn't even the thick silence hanging in the air like a warning. It was the 4 suitcases. Mine. Lined up neatly on the sidewalk like they were waiting for the garbage truck. Before we dive into all of this, let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. Connecting with viewers across the world is a huge source of inspiration for us. At first, I hoped it was a mistake. Maybe the housekeeper had left them out by accident. Maybe Brittany was airing the garage. Maybe something, anything, that made sense. But when I stepped out of the taxi, my knees aching after the flight from Colorado, and bent down to pick up the envelope tucked under the handle of the largest suitcase, the truth landed like a punch to the chest. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Your loving daughter-in-law. Oh, the handwriting was unmistakable. Sharp, slanted, always slightly rushed, like she had more important things to do than finish her words. My hands shook as I read it again. I looked up at the house. 35 years. Thomas and I had built it from the ground up. I still remembered the day the foundation was poured. How excited we were to finally have something that was ours. We'd planted every tree in the yard, painted every wall with our own hands, raised Michael here, buried Thomas here. This wasn't just a house. It was my life. I fumbled for my phone, still standing in the driveway like a ghost, and dialed the bank. The taxi hadn't even pulled away yet. "Yes, Mrs. Harper," the woman on the other end said after a few seconds of typing. "We show your automatic mortgage payment of $1,867 processed last Friday. Right on schedule." "Thank you," I whispered, and ended the call. The clouds had been gathering all day, dark and low like a warning. Now the first fat raindrop landed on my forehead. Then another, and another. Within seconds it was pouring. I stood there, 68 years old, alone in the rain, watching my memories get soaked in cardboard boxes. There had been signs, of course. Little ones, brushed aside as paranoia. The sideways glances between Brittany and Michael when I mentioned repainting the kitchen. The times my reading chair accidentally ended up in the basement. The suggestion wrapped in honey that maybe I'd be more comfortable in one of those retirement communities with a shuttle and a shared dining room. Little things. Until they weren't. The garage door was unlocked. Inside, a narrow twin mattress sat against the back wall, draped with a thin blanket. A portable clothing rack leaned to one side, my jackets and blouses hanging like strangers in someone else's closet. My books were packed in boxes labeled Mom's Stuff. A single lamp flickered on a nightstand that looked borrowed from Emma's old nursery. I sat on the mattress. The concrete floor was cold beneath my feet. Through the narrow window, I could still see the house, the kitchen where I used to bake blueberry muffins on Sunday mornings, the dining room where Thomas would read the paper aloud, the porch where Michael took his first steps. And now I was no longer welcome in it. My phone buzzed. A message from Michael. "Mom, we need the space. Brittany's been asking for a home office for months. The garage apartment has everything you need. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult." As if I were the problem. As if giving birth to him, raising him, taking a second job when Thomas's business struggled, paying his tuition, watching Emma every other weekend. As if all of that didn't count anymore. I didn't reply. I called Diane. "Evelyn?" She answered on the first ring, her voice already tight with worry. "What's wrong?" I wanted to lie, to say something small, but the words came out broken and raw. "I need a place to stay." She didn't ask why. She didn't say, "What happened?" She just said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes, and hung up. The rain hadn't let up when she pulled into the driveway, headlights cutting through the dark. She took one look at the garage behind me, the boxes labeled with my name, and said, "Get in." That night, in the guest room of Diane's modest home, tucked under an old quilt that smelled like lavender and thyme, I couldn't sleep. Not from anger, not even from grief, but from something harder to name, something deeper, something that whispered, "They think you've disappeared?" If you're still watching, comment one so I know you're still with me. Diane didn't say much as we drove. She didn't need to. Her presence alone, steady and unflinching, was enough to keep me from unraveling completely. I stared out the window at the blurry streetlights, the rain streaking down like the sky itself couldn't hold back any longer. Her house sat at the edge of Ashland, not far from the high school we both used to work at. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and the kind of warmth that only decades of family photos and mismatched furniture can offer. Diane called it clutter. I called it homey. "Spare room's all yours," she said, unlocking the front door and flipping on the light. "Clean sheets, fresh towel, and I didn't skimp on the pillows." I smiled weakly and stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender and lemon oil wrapping around me like a hug. That night, I lay awake on her guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in lazy circles. Every few seconds, one of the blades creaked like it had something it wanted to say but didn't know how. I knew the feeling. Somewhere past midnight, Diane knocked lightly and cracked the door. "You want to talk about it?" she asked. "No," I said. Then, "Yes." She didn't press, just slipped into the old armchair by the window and waited. "I thought giving Michael and Brittany the house would help them," I said finally. "After Thomas passed, they were struggling. Emma was still in diapers. I figured they needed it more than I did. And you didn't want to be alone," Diane added gently. I nodded. At first, it felt right. Helping them, being around Emma. But little by little, things changed. My things disappeared. My suggestions were dismissed. Brittany started calling it her kitchen. Michael stopped saying thank you. I told myself I was imagining it. But you weren't. Number. I sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The worst part is, I kept paying the mortgage. Diane blinked. "What?" "I never told them. Just kept the autopay going. I didn't want to burden them." Diane shook her head slowly, eyes sharp now. "Evelyn, that's not love. That's enabling." "I know," I said quietly. "I just wanted to feel useful. You are useful. You're thoughtful. And strong. But you're not disposable." The word struck me hard. Disposable. That's how I'd been made to feel. Packed up. Pushed aside. "I need to do something," I said suddenly. "I can't just let them sell my life to the highest bidder." Diane nodded once, as if she'd been waiting for me to say it. "Good. Because I've got someone I think you should meet." His name was Nathan Wallace. 30-something. Wore a flannel shirt and jeans, like he was on his way to chop wood rather than practice law. He was Diane's nephew and specialized in elder rights and housing law, 2 things I'd never imagined needing until now. We met in his office 2 days later, a small converted bungalow with ivy climbing the porch rails and a chalkboard sign out front that read, "Justice lives here." "Mrs. Harper," he said, standing to shake my hand. "I read through the documents your friend sent. You've been paying the mortgage on a house you no longer legally own?" "Yes," I said, embarrassed. "I transferred the deed to my son and his wife 2 years ago, but I kept making the payments. Quietly." And now they're planning to sell it?" "Yes." Nathan frowned, fingers drumming on his legal pad. "Well, that changes things." I sat straighter. "What do you mean?" "If you've been paying the mortgage consistently without benefit, we might have a case for something called an equitable lien." "A what?" "Think of it as a financial fingerprint. Even though your name isn't on the title, your contributions give you a legal interest in the property. They can't sell it without addressing that." I blinked. "So, I can stop them?" "You can slow them down, potentially prevent the sale entirely unless they buy you out or transfer it back." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to hurt Michael. He's still my son." Nathan looked at me with surprising softness. "Wanting accountability isn't the same as wanting revenge." I nodded slowly. "And," he added, "even if you don't want to take legal action right away, knowing your rights gives you leverage." "Oh?" For the first time in weeks, I felt something flicker inside me. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter, firmer. Resolve. The next day, I stood outside my old home on Maple Avenue. The bushes in the front yard looked overgrown. The porch light still broken. Funny how quickly things fall apart when the wrong people take over. I rang the doorbell. My heart thundered in my chest. Brittany answered. surprise flashing in her eyes before she replaced it with that tight, practiced smile. Evelyn, we weren't expecting you. I need to speak with Michael. Both of you, actually. She hesitated. Is this about the garage? Because we... No, I said. It's about the house. A pause. Then she stepped aside. The living room had changed. Cold grays, hard edges, no warmth. They'd removed Thomas's old armchair. The photo wall was gone. Michael came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Mom? What's going on? I know you're planning to sell the house, I said, my voice steady. Diane told me. He glanced at Brittany, who said nothing. We were going to tell you, Michael said, once everything was settled. Settled? I repeated. You mean once I was safely out of the way? Mom, he sighed. You gave us the house. We assumed that I'd just fade into the background? I asked. That I'd be grateful to live in the garage like some forgotten pet? Michael winced. I've been paying the mortgage, I continued. Every single month. Almost 2 years. Brittany crossed her arms. That was your choice. I nodded. And I'm making another one now. I handed them a letter drawn up by Nathan. It stated that I was placing a lien on the property and would be pursuing financial restitution. Michael read it, his face growing pale. You can't do this, he said. I can. And I am. 6. Mom, what about Emma? The baby on the way? Our plans? What about mine? I said quietly. What about the 35 years I gave to this place, to this family? He didn't have an answer. I'm not trying to destroy anything, I said, but I won't be erased. I turned toward the door. Wait, Michael called after me. Can we talk about this? I paused, not turning back. We just did. That night, back at Diane's, we opened a bottle of wine and sat in the backyard. I can't believe you actually did it, she said. Me neither. You okay? I think, I said, watching the stars blink awake above us. For the first time in a long while, I'm starting to be. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. The morning after I served Michael and Brittany the lien notice, I woke with a strange stillness in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like space, as if something heavy had finally been lifted after years of pressing down. Diane had already left a cup of coffee for me on the kitchen table, along with a note. We'll talk when you're ready, as the world's still turning and so are you. I smiled, the first real one in what felt like weeks. But I couldn't sit still. Not after what I'd just set in motion. The house, the lien, the memories. They circled in my mind like gulls over water, restless and loud. I needed to do something. Move. Breathe. So I walked. Downtown Ashland wasn't big 3 main streets and a park that bloomed with tulips in the spring, but it had always felt like home. The bookstore on the corner still had its creaky floorboards. The diner still sold rhubarb pie by the slice. And Rosie's Cafe, tucked between a thrift store and a florist, still had that sweet cinnamon smell that used to drift down the sidewalk like a hug. As I passed by, the Help Wanted sign in the window caught my eye. Waitstaff needed. Morning shift. No experience necessary, just a smile. I stared at the sign longer than I should have. It had been years since I'd worked. Decades, really. My last job had been teaching 3rd grade, and even that felt like another lifetime. But still, a smile? I had that. I pushed open the door. The bell above the entrance gave a cheerful chime. Inside, the cafe was bright and full of the kind of noise that comforted. Instead of overwhelmed clinking mugs, quiet chatter, the occasional hiss of steamed milk. A woman behind the counter looked up and grinned. "Welcome to Rosie's," she said. "Grab any seat you like, On." I hesitated, then walked up to her instead. "Actually, I saw your sign." And her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked closer. "Wait a second. Miss Harper?" He blinked. "Yes? It's me, Linda Carmichael, class of 2096. You taught me fractions and how to write a 5-paragraph essay. It took me a second, but then it clicked. The braces, the nervous energy. The girl who'd cried when her dog passed and wrote an entire journal about him. Rosie? I asked, smiling now. She nodded, a little sheepishly. I bought the place from my aunt 5 years ago. Kept the name, added some better coffee. We both laughed. What brings you in? She asked. I looked around the cafe. The warmth, the clatter, the smell of something baking. I think I need a job, I said. Rosie tilted her head. Are you serious? I'm not looking to run marathons, I said. But I can carry a coffee pot and remember names. And I need a fresh start. She didn't ask why, just reached under the counter and pulled out an apron. Start tomorrow, 7 sharp. And we still sell pie by the slice. Working at Rosie's wasn't easy. My back ached after each shift, and by lunchtime, my feet felt like someone had stuffed bricks into my shoes. But there was something incredibly satisfying about handing someone a hot cup of coffee and knowing I'd earned every cent of the tip in my pocket. The regulars got used to me quickly. Mr. Travers ordered the same sourdough toast every morning, and if he forgot the strawberry jam, he'd mumble about it under his breath. Bonnie and Lou, a retired couple who split everything down the middle, taught me the difference between an easy egg and a gentle flip. Teenagers came in with backpacks and headphones, and little kids left sticky fingerprints on the jam jars. But the best part wasn't the work. It was feeling needed again. Every time I set a table or refilled someone's coffee, I felt a little more like myself. Not the woman who had been boxed up and left in a garage, but Evelyn Harper, teacher, neighbor, friend, and now waitress. One afternoon, after my shift, I returned to Diane's house to find her waiting with a glass of lemonade and a smile that said, "You're not going to like this, but I'm going to tell you anyway." "Michael called," she said. I froze halfway into the porch swing. "He's been trying to reach you." I turned off my phone. I figured. She handed me the lemonade. "He said the bank called about the lien. Asked what you were trying to do." I took a long sip. "Trying to remind them I exist." Diane nodded. "Do you want to talk to him?" "Number? But I should." The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 6 voicemails. 4 texts. All from Michael. The last message simply said, "Please, can we talk?" So I met him. Not at the house. Not at Diane's. At Rosie's. He looked out of place among the cozy booths and chalkboard menus in his tailored slacks and expensive watch, but I let him sit anyway. "I wasn't expecting this," he said, glancing around. "You? Working here?" "I needed a job. And some dignity." Michael winced. "That's not fair." I raised an eyebrow. Neither was the garage. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? About how it all happened. We thought—" "I know what you thought," I interrupted. "You thought I'd stay quiet forever. That my love meant silence." He didn't deny it. "We're in trouble," he said finally. "The house sale fell through. Our credit is tanking. The baby's on the way. We need help." "And now you remember who I am?" He flinched again. "Mom, please, just lift the lien. We'll find a way to make things right. We just need time." I studied his face. My son. The boy who once scraped his knees chasing butterflies. Now a man so used to taking, he'd forgotten how to give. "No," I said gently. "No? I won't lift the lien, but I will offer to buy the house. For the balance of the mortgage, that's fair." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "It's worth 3 times that. Then you're free to pay the mortgage and wait for another buyer." His mouth opened, then closed. "You taught me to stand up for what's right," I said softly. It's time I listened. He left, silent and stunned. Later that week, I met Nathan again. He looked over the documents, nodded slowly, and said, "You're doing the right thing." "I'm not so sure," I said. "You are," he said. "Because for once you're not just surviving, you're choosing." There was something both terrifying and liberating about putting your terms on paper. Nathan drafted the purchase proposal by the end of the week, a concise, dignified document that made it clear I wasn't asking for favors. I was making an offer, a business transaction, the kind that should have never been necessary between a mother and her child. But here we were. The numbers were straightforward. I would resume the mortgage payments, take over the remaining balance, and in return, the deed would be signed back over to me. The house I built would once again be mine. I know it's not ideal, Nathan said as we reviewed the papers in his office. But if they agree, this is the cleanest way forward. What if they don't? He gave a small shrug. Then we escalate. But you've got leverage. They need the lien lifted to sell. You're in the driver's seat now. It still felt surreal. When I walked out of Nathan's office, the autumn sun caught in the gold leaves overhead, painting everything in that soft, fleeting light October always brings warm, but with an edge that reminds you winter is coming. Back at Diane's house, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen in my hand for nearly an hour before signing the documents. She didn't rush me. "You're doing something brave," she said quietly. "No," I said, exhaling. "I'm just doing what I should have done a long time ago." Michael and Brittany arrived at Nathan's office 3 days later. They looked like they were headed to a court hearing, not a family meeting. Brittany wore a blazer too sharp for comfort, and Michael had that polished corporate glaze in his eyes. They didn't greet me. Nathan welcomed them with professional warmth and gestured to the table. "This is the proposal Mrs. Harper is offering," he said, sliding the folder toward them. "Please review it carefully." Brittany opened it, scanning the first page quickly. Her jaw tightened before she even reached the numbers. "You want to buy the house," she said flatly. "For the remaining balance," Michael added, disbelief dripping from his voice. "It's what I've already paid for," I said evenly, "and what I intend to continue paying for. But it's worth almost triple that," Brittany snapped. "Then you're free to pay the mortgage yourselves," Nathan said calmly, "and sell it when the lien clears." Her lips pressed together in a thin line. Michael looked down at his hands. "We have plans. The new baby. The move to Oakwood Hills." "I had plans too," I interrupted. "A quiet retirement. A home I thought would always be mine. But I was boxed up and set aside like a forgotten suitcase." Silence. "I'm not here to punish you," I added. "I'm here to reclaim what was mine all along." Brittany leaned back in her chair. "You really think you can just take it all back?" I looked her square in the eye. "Number, but I can take back myself." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, appraisals, and negotiations. Nothing happened quickly, but that was fine. I had learned to be patient in the hardest ways. Meanwhile, life at Rosie's Cafe settled into a rhythm. The regulars greeted me by name. Linda Rosie started trusting me with the register. I even learned how to froth milk properly, which, for someone who used to drink her coffee black, felt like mastering a foreign language. And then, on a chilly Wednesday morning, my phone rang. "Mrs. Harper?" It was Trevor Phillips from the bank. "We've finalized the paperwork on your lien settlement. The house is ready for title transfer as soon as your final payment clears." I didn't cry, but my hands trembled as I set the phone down. Diane was already pouring 2 cups of tea. "So?" she asked, eyes sparkling. "It's mine," I whispered. She smiled, raised her cup. "To homecomings and second chances." The house looked different when I walked through the front door again. Not because the walls were a different color, though they were, or the furniture had been replaced, it had, but because the silence was finally kind, no longer suffocating, no longer echoing with dismissal. Just quiet. Michael and Brittany had moved out the week before. We'd barely spoken. I didn't ask where they were going, and they didn't tell me. That was fine. This house, my house, no longer felt haunted by their presence. It felt like it was waiting. I wandered through the rooms slowly, my footsteps soft on floors that still remembered every holiday, every spilled cup of coffee, every lullaby. Upstairs, the master bedroom had been cleared out. All that remained was the bed frame I'd stored at Diane's and the old quilt I'd brought back with me. I made the bed in silence. I unpacked my books. I rehung the photo of Thomas and me from our 30th anniversary, the one Brittany had taken down. And then, I sat in the chair by the window, watching golden leaves drift past like gentle reminders that even endings can be beautiful. Later that week, I invited Diane and Nathan over for dinner. We ate spaghetti on mismatched plates and drank red wine out of coffee mugs because I still hadn't unpacked the fancy glasses. Linda from Rosie's showed up with a pie, and her twin boys ran around the living room like it had always been theirs. I laughed more that night than I had in years. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of silence, not of being alone, not even of starting over. I was Evelyn Harper. And this time, I wasn't going anywhere. It had been almost 2 months since I'd walked back into my house. 2 months of rearranging rooms, scrubbing away layers of cold modernity, and slowly restoring warmth to the place that once held my life. I'd swapped the gray pillows for floral ones, rehung the lace curtains Thomas had once grumbled about, dug up the old garden beds out front, and planted tulips his favorite. But some things couldn't be fixed with curtains or flowers, like the ache in my chest every time I passed the hallway where Emma's laughter used to echo. We hadn't seen each other since the lean notice. Michael hadn't brought her around. Brittany hadn't called. I told myself it was fine, that children were resilient, that if Emma needed me, she would find her way back. But every night, I still glanced at the photo on the mantel, Emma, age 5, grinning with a popsicle in one hand and paint smeared across her cheek. We'd been painting birdhouses that day. She'd said mine looked like a rainbow chicken house. The house was quiet now. Too quiet sometimes. So when the knock came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, I wasn't expecting it. I opened the door, and there she was, Emma, 7 now, wearing a yellow raincoat with polka dots and holding a book so big it looked like it might swallow her hands. I blinked, heart stumbling. "Grandma?" she said softly. "Daddy said I could bring you my book, the one you used to read with the funny voices." Her eyes searched mine, hesitant but hopeful. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I knelt down and opened my arms. She launched herself into them like no time had passed. I made hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, just like she liked. She kicked off her boots by the door, leaving tiny puddles I didn't care about one bit. We curled up on the couch under the quilt from the old reading nook, the one Brittany had once shoved into a storage bin. I pulled the book from her rain-spotted hands. The Gruffalo, our favorite. I didn't ask what Michael had said. I didn't ask why Brittany had let her come. I just read. When I did the Gruffalo voice low and grumbly with a dramatic growl, Emma giggled so hard she spilled cocoa on her sleeve. She didn't care. Neither did I. After the last page, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "Grandma," she whispered, "are you mad at Daddy?" I swallowed. Honesty had always been my compass, even with a child. "I'm sad," I said, "and hurt, but I still love your daddy." She nodded like that made sense in a way only children can accept. "Mommy says you were mean." I stiffened slightly. "Oh?" "She said you tried to steal the house, but Daddy said you were just tired of being treated like wallpaper." He blinked. "Wallpaper?" Emma looked up. "You know, there, but not really seen." Something tightened in my chest. She said, "Maybe we can't visit anymore, but Daddy said maybe I could come sometimes, if I don't say anything about it at school." Of course it would come with rules, with control. "Emma," I said gently, brushing damp curls from her cheek, "you don't have to lie about seeing me." She looked down at her hands. "But I don't want Mommy to get mad." I paused. "Do you want to come here sometimes?" She nodded quickly. "I miss the way the house smells, and you make pancakes like clouds." My throat tightened. "I'd love that," I said, "as long as it's what you want." "It is." She hugged me again, tighter this time. And I knew no matter what happened with Michael or Brittany, this child would remember love. Not tension, not bitterness, not betrayal. Love. After Emma left, the house didn't feel so quiet anymore. Her laughter had echoed again through the living room. Her tiny hands had touched the pages of our favorite book. Her presence had stitched a small seam in the tear that had ripped through this home. But it also stirred something else. Anger. Not hot and explosive, but slow, steady, rooted. Not for Emma. Never for Emma. But for how Michael had let her get caught in the middle. For how Brittany had turned a 7-year-old into a pawn in a war I never wanted. I didn't want custody battles or courtroom scenes. I wanted my granddaughter to have a place she knew was hers. Always. So I called Nathan. "I want to make it official," I told him the next morning at his office. He looked up from his laptop. "Official how?" "I want visitation rights. Legally. Nothing dramatic, just something Michael and Brittany can't dangle like a toy. I don't want Emma to think love is conditional." Nathan nodded slowly. We can draft a family agreement, he said. Non-litigious. More of a formal understanding. That's perfect. He smiled. You're becoming quite the negotiator, Evelyn. I grinned. Turns out retirement gave me a second career. A week later, Michael came to the house. No warning. Just showed up on the porch like he hadn't disappeared for months. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking smaller. Emma told me you made pancakes. I did. She hasn't stopped talking about them. And I waited. He exhaled. Mom, I know I've handled this badly. I raised an eyebrow. Which part? All of it. Silence stretched between us. Then, Brittany's angry. She thinks you manipulated us. And you? I think I stopped seeing you. Not on purpose, just... You became part of the furniture. I didn't flinch. You were always just there, he continued. Reliable. Quiet. I didn't realize how unfair that was until it was too late. I crossed my arms. You can start by respecting the agreement Nathan's sending over. He nodded. I will. And Emma comes here because she wants to, not because you allow it. Another nod. Understood. He looked past me, into the house. Does it feel different? Yes, I said. Because now, I belong in it. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said. It wasn't everything, but it was something. The first thing I noticed after reclaiming my home wasn't how empty it felt, but how still it had become. Not the uneasy stillness of a house where people tiptoe around each other, but the kind that settles like soft dust over a place long neglected. A quiet that felt earned, deserved. I no longer woke to footsteps I didn't recognize or the sound of a coffee maker grinding at 5 a.m. for someone else's schedule. No more whispered arguments bleeding through the walls. No more finding my reading lamp missing, or discovering that my gardening shears had been donated without my consent. For the first time in years, everything in this house stayed exactly where I left it. It was unsettling at first, but then liberating. I rearranged the furniture, not out of necessity, but for joy. I returned the old threadbare armchair to its rightful spot near the bay window, where morning sun spilled like honey across the wood floor. I set a pot of basil on the kitchen windowsill. I unpacked every single book and lined them on shelves again, not by color or size or trend, but by memory. One shelf for Thomas's favorites, one for mine, one just for Emma filled with stories we used to read together, waiting patiently for her small fingers to turn their pages again. The days passed slowly but sweetly. I rose early out of habit, still brewing 2 cups of coffee even though only one was ever consumed. I'd sit in the quiet and sip, sometimes journaling, sometimes simply watching the birds at the feeder Thomas had mounted in our early years together. The blue jays were back. They always came in spring. Some mornings, I'd walk down Maple Street to Rosie's Cafe even when I wasn't scheduled. Rosa insisted I come by any time. You keep the regulars in line, she said with a wink. And I liked it, the sense of usefulness, of showing up, of mattering. Evenings I spent in the garden, knees in the dirt, gloves tugged high. I unearthed bulbs that had gone dormant, trimmed back hedges that had grown wild under Brittany's preference for minimalist landscaping. There was satisfaction in every leaf turned, every weed pulled. More than once, neighbors passing by would stop and chat. Glad to see you back, Evelyn, Mr. Dawson from 2 doors down said. Place is starting to look like home again. Never stopped being home, I replied. Word had gotten around, not the details, but enough, that Evelyn Harper was back in her house, that something had happened with her son and his wife. No one pried, but people looked at me with something new in their eyes, respect. One Saturday afternoon, Rosa came by after her shift with a tin of snickerdoodles and an idea. You ever thought about hosting a book club again? She asked. I remember you used to run a great one back in the day. I hadn't thought about it, but I found myself smiling. Maybe it's time. Oh well. The next Thursday, 5 women crowded into my living room, some old friends, some new faces. We drank wine, argued over plot twists, and laughed until someone cried. It felt like breathing again after holding it in too long. Later that night, as I folded throws and rinsed wine glasses, I realized how full the house had felt. Not with things, but with presence, with laughter, with shared silence that wasn't lonely. I started writing again. Nothing fancy. Just short reflections. Fragments, really. About aging, resilience, motherhood. Sometimes I wrote letters to Thomas not to send, just to say what still lived in me. One day, while rummaging through the attic, I found the old recorder we used to use when Emma was little. We'd make silly radio shows her as the host, me as the co-host with the funny voices. I charged it, pressed play, and let the years rewind. "Welcome back to Emma and Nana's Adventure Hour," her tiny voice chirped. I laughed and cried all at once. That sound pure, unguarded joy, it filled the whole house. I didn't need anything else that day. The next time Emma came over, I let her hear it. She giggled. I sounded like a baby. "You sounded like my heart," I said. She hugged me so tightly my ribs ached, but in the best way. Life wasn't what I thought it would be at this age. But maybe it was never supposed to follow a straight path. I'd been detoured, redirected, but I hadn't been ended. And now, in the soft hush of the life I was rebuilding, I was beginning to hear myself again. A voice I thought I'd lost in the noise of everyone else's expectations. It was small, yes, but steady, and unmistakably mine. It was a Tuesday morning, just after the breakfast rush at Rosie's Cafe. I was wiping down the counter, humming along to an old Patsy Cline tune playing faintly over the radio, when the front door swung open with a jingle. I looked up and nearly dropped my rag. Gregory. He looked out of place in the warm, homespun atmosphere of the cafe, still dressed in tailored slacks and a pressed shirt, though his usually pristine hair was slightly mussed. His expression was tight, guarded, but not angry. Not yet. "Mom," he said, glancing around, probably hoping we weren't about to have a scene. Rosa raised an eyebrow at me from behind the espresso machine. I gave her a nod. "I'll take my break," I said, slipping off my apron. We sat at the corner booth, the same one he had occupied just weeks ago, asking me to lift the lean. "I thought about what you said," Gregory began. His voice was quieter this time, almost tentative. I folded my hands on the table. "And?" He exhaled. "We've been looking for another way. Vanessa wanted to fight it. She still does. But I've been thinking about everything you said, about what I said." I waited. I'd learned that silence had its own kind of power. He fiddled with a sugar packet. "You were right, about a lot of it. We used you. We got used to the help, and we stopped seeing it as help. It just became expected." That alone felt like a mile traveled. "I didn't come here to apologize," he added quickly, as if afraid to give too much. "I'm not there yet, but I'm trying to understand." "Trying is something," I said. "More than I expected." He looked up then, and for a moment I saw something I hadn't in a long time, my son. Not the man hardened by his own ego and entitlement, but the boy who used to draw me crayon pictures and tape them to the fridge. "Emma misses you," he said. "She asks about you every day. And she deserves better than this. Better than parents who let pride get in the way of family." My throat tightened. I nodded. "So Vanessa and I talked, and we've decided we'll accept the sale, to you. You'll get the house back. We'll take the money and start over somewhere else. It's not what we wanted, but maybe it's what we need." I studied him carefully. He meant it, or at least, most of him did. "Thank you," I said. "Truly." He looked down again. "You know, when Dad died, I thought I had to fill his shoes. Be strong. Take charge. I didn't realize I was stepping on everyone else to do it." I reached across the table and touched his hand lightly. "Being strong doesn't mean never asking for help, or pretending you don't need your mother." He gave a quiet, almost broken laugh. We sat there for a while, neither of us needing to fill the space. Just letting something long broken start to mend. "I'll talk to Brian," I said. "We'll start the paperwork." He nodded. "Can I tell Emma she can visit this weekend?" The smile I gave him wasn't just for show. "Tell her I'll have cookies ready." When he left, I sat in that booth long after my break was over. Rosa came over, set a fresh cup of coffee in front of me without asking. "You okay?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "Something changed today." She patted my shoulder. Told you. You're stronger than you think. And in that moment, I believed her. Because forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a light switch. It was a process. And today, Gregory had taken the first step. And so had I. The house was officially mine again. The papers were signed, the lien resolved, and Gregory and Vanessa had moved out a week ago. The silence that followed their departure was both heavy and freeing. There were no more late night stomping up the stairs. No tense glances at dinner. No cautious silences in my own living room. It was just me. The creaks and sighs of this old house, and the steady ticking of the grandfather clock Richard had refinished in our first year of marriage. I was home, but coming home didn't mean everything was easy. The first morning, I woke early out of habit more than necessity. I wandered the empty halls like a ghost relearning its haunts. Without Emma's giggles or Vanessa's heels clicking on the hardwood, the space felt vast. But for the first time in years, it was mine. Every picture I hung, every pillow I fluffed, every cup of tea brewed in the kitchen felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I moved my reading chair back to the window where I'd always liked it. The light streamed in the way it used to, casting long shadows on the floorboards. I sat there for hours that day, wrapped in Richard's old cardigan, rereading the first book we ever read together, To Kill a Mockingbird. He always loved Atticus Finch, said he reminded him of what a man should be: gentle, strong, and principled. I missed him more than I could put into words. Martha came by with fresh muffins and a potted fern. For the mantel, she said, placing it beside a photo of Richard and me on our 25th anniversary. And the muffins are for your nerves. First week in an empty nest, even if the birds flew off a little rudely. I laughed. It feels strange, like I should still be tiptoeing around. She handed me a cup of tea. Well, you're not. Tiptoe no more. This place is yours again. Breathe it in. That night, I took a long bath, something I hadn't done in ages. I lit a candle, played soft music, and let the water wash over months. No, years of tension. When I crawled into bed, I felt light, almost young. The next day, Emma called. "Grandma, are you coming to my recital?" My heart leapt. "When is it, sweetheart?" "Saturday?" "Mommy says you're too busy working now, but I told her you love music." I swallowed the ache. I wouldn't miss it for the world. "Tell Mommy I'll be there." I could hear her smile through the phone. "Okay, I'm playing the piano. Love you." Love you more. Saturday came. I wore a pale blue dress Richard always loved. My hair was pinned up neatly, my heart fluttering like I was the one performing. The recital was held at a small community center. When I walked in, Gregory noticed me first. He stood, surprised, but didn't object. Vanessa offered a tight nod, then turned her attention to Emma. Emma spotted me and waved enthusiastically from the second row of chairs set up for the kids. My heart swelled. She looked so proud in her little black dress and shiny shoes. I took a seat in the back. When Emma's turn came, she walked up to the piano, sat tall, and played a short, sweet melody. She stumbled on one note but recovered quickly. I clapped until my hands hurt. She turned, beaming, and gave a small bow. After the performance, she ran straight to me. "You came?" "Of course I did. You were wonderful." Gregory walked up slowly. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded. It meant a lot to her. "She's missed you. So have I, in my own way." I studied his face. There was something softer in his eyes. Less pride, more humility. "Let's just take it one recital at a time," I said gently. Vanessa approached, her expression unreadable. "We're heading out. Emma, say goodbye." Emma hugged me tightly. "Can I come to your house soon?" "We'll work it out," Gregory answered before I could. As they left, I stood alone in the parking lot, watching the car drive away. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it wasn't a wall either. That night, back in my house, I sat on the porch swing. The stars were scattered across the sky like blessings. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and let the breeze settle over me. The hardest part about putting yourself first, I'd learned, wasn't the loneliness, it was the silence that followed. The space that opened when old roles were abandoned. But slowly, That space was being filled with things that mattered. My books, my garden, my work at Rosie's, Coden, and the occasional faltering steps toward something better with my son. Rebuilding, I realized, wasn't just about laying bricks again. It was about deciding what kind of life I wanted inside those walls. And for the first time in a long, long while, that life was beginning to feel like my own. And I was ready to live it. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if unsure whether it was welcome. But I was ready. Ready for warmth, for blossoms, for something new. The daffodils I'd planted with Richard years ago were just starting to push through the soil, green shoots breaking the cold ground like quiet acts of defiance. Every morning before work, I'd step outside with a cup of coffee and check their progress. It became a small ritual proof that life, even the most dormant kind, had a way of returning. At Rosie's cafe, things settled into a rhythm. My coworkers had embraced me fully, no longer treating me like the new hire or the woman with the complicated past. I was just Audrey, the one who made the best pie crust, the one who could calm cranky toddlers and grumpy grandpas alike, the one who always had an extra tissue in her apron pocket and a quiet word for those who needed it. Rosa, ever the sharp-eyed owner, noticed the change in me. "You've got your glow back," she said one afternoon as we restocked sugar packets. "The Audrey I met 3 months ago was hunched and quiet. This one stands tall." "I feel taller," I admitted, "like I've come back to myself." One afternoon, as I cleared a table by the front window, a familiar face appeared outside. It was Emma, her nose pressed to the glass. I blinked, surprised, then saw Gregory behind her, hands in his coat pockets. They stepped inside, and Emma rushed over, throwing her arms around my waist. "I told Daddy I missed your apple pie," she said. I knelt down to her level. "You know what? I just pulled one from the oven." She clapped. "Yay!" Gregory approached more slowly. He looked different. Tired, maybe, or just subdued. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Gregory." He glanced around. "Is it okay if we stay a bit?" I nodded. "Of course." They took a booth near the window. I brought over 2 slices of pie and a glass of milk for Emma. As she dug in, Gregory spoke. "Vanessa's moved out," he said quietly. I sat across from him, surprised but trying not to show it. "I see. We're not separating officially yet. Just time apart. We need it." I watched him. The son who had hurt me so deeply now sat across from me, vulnerable. "I don't know if it's fixable," he admitted. "Some things aren't," I said. "But some things grow stronger after being pruned. And," he gave a weak smile, "like your daffodils." I blinked. "You remember that? Dad used to joke you cared more about those flowers than us." "He knew better," I said softly. Gregory leaned forward. "I'm trying, Mom. I don't know how to undo everything, but I'm trying." "Trying is a start," I said. "It always is." That evening, after they left, Rosa joined me at the counter. "He's showing up," she said. "That counts." I nodded. "I'm not expecting miracles. Just honesty." Later, back at home, I opened the windows to let in the evening air. The wind smelled like cut grass and lilacs. I stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, when I caught sight of the garden bed out front. Tiny yellow blooms. The daffodils had finally arrived. A month passed. In that time, the daffodils had bloomed and begun to fade, replaced by tulips and the first buds of peonies. My days took on a calm, steady rhythm work at the cafe in the mornings, tending the garden in the afternoons, and quiet evenings reading or sitting on the porch swing, listening to the neighborhood wind down. Peaceful didn't mean uneventful. Gregory stopped by every weekend with Emma. Sometimes they stayed for lunch. Sometimes just long enough for Emma to help me in the garden or bake cookies. Gregory seemed to struggle with what to say, but his effort was genuine. I could see him trying to bridge the distance, even if neither of us knew exactly how. Vanessa didn't come. I didn't ask why. One Saturday, while Emma and I were planting marigolds, she looked up suddenly and asked, "Grandma, are you still mad at Daddy?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm not mad," I said carefully. But sometimes grown-ups hurt each other without meaning to, and it takes time to heal. Like when I scraped my knee? She asked. Exactly. Some hurts are on the outside, and some are on the inside, but both need care. She nodded, then pressed a marigold into the soil. I hope it heals soon. Me too, sweetheart. That night, I sat with that conversation for a long time. Emma's words had cut straight through years of complexity. I wasn't angry anymore, not truly. I was sad, grieving the closeness I used to share with my son, the family dinners that felt full of love, not silence or tension. But grief is just love with nowhere to go. And I was starting to find places for that love again, in the soil, in the cafe, in every laugh I shared with Emma. 2 weeks later, Gregory showed up alone. He looked worn, paler, like someone carrying more than he knew how to hold. Vanessa filed for separation, he said, not even waiting to be invited in. She's moving back to her parents' place in Dallas. I offered him a seat at the kitchen table. I didn't know what to say to Emma. I told her Mommy needs some time away, that it's not her fault. I nodded slowly. And how are you? He gave a hollow laugh. I don't know. Lost, maybe. Guilty. I reached across the table. For the first time in what felt like years, he didn't pull away. I wasn't a good son, he said. And I let Vanessa turn our home into something cold. I saw it happening, and I didn't stop it. You didn't stop it because you were trying to make things work. For your family. For her. I know what that feels like. I don't know how to fix it. You start small. A garden doesn't bloom in a day. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he asked, "Can I help you plant the next round of flowers?" I smiled. "There's a bag of zinnia seeds in the pantry. Go get them." We planted in silence, side by side. For the first time in years, our hands worked together. The dirt under our nails, the sweat on our foreheads, it all felt like something sacred. Something beginning. That night, after Gregory left, I looked at the row of freshly planted seeds. Maybe not all things that break can be fixed, but some things, if given time and care, can grow into something new. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. It was Sunday, and the streets were quieter than usual. Morning light filtered through budding trees, casting soft, golden shadows on the pavement. I passed the church Richard and I used to attend, its bell ringing faintly in the distance. I paused for a moment, just watching families walking in, children tugging at parents' hands, elderly couples leaning into each other for balance. It reminded me of the stability we once had, the calm rituals that gave life its rhythm. Back at home, I changed into gardening clothes and headed to the backyard. I had plans to replant the herb bed, a project I'd been putting off for weeks. As I knelt to pull out overgrown thyme and yellowing parsley, I thought about how much my life had changed in just a few months. From eviction and heartbreak to quiet strength and a small but sturdy hope. I had rebuilt something. Gregory returned that afternoon with Emma. "I told her we could make lemonade like we used to," he said, holding up a small bag of lemons. Emma skipped past him and threw her arms around my waist. "I missed you yesterday." "We're making up for it today," I said, brushing her hair from her forehead. In the kitchen, we squeezed lemons, stirred sugar, and added ice. Emma insisted on pouring the first glass and brought it out to the porch herself. "Cheers," she shouted, lifting her glass like a tiny queen. Gregory and I laughed, and I watched something ease in his posture. He looked younger somehow, like the boy who used to chase fireflies in this very yard. After Emma went to play, Gregory turned to me. "I've been seeing a counselor," he said. I raised my eyebrows. "Vanessa wanted me to at first, but now I go for me. It's helping. Slowly." "I'm glad," I said. And I meant it. He looked around. "The house looks better than it has in years." "And I've had help," I said, nodding toward the tulips and the zinnias we'd planted together. Gregory took a deep breath. "I want to be better, Mom. For Emma. For myself. For you. You're already on the way." That evening, after they left, I sat alone on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. The air smelled like lemon and fresh soil. I closed my eyes, letting it all wash over me, the ache, the joy, the cautious hope. Life had a way of surprising you, and sometimes it gave you exactly what you didn't know you needed. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. The following week brought summer's first real heat wave. At Rosie's Cafe, the ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, doing little to keep the air cool. Still, the regulars came in like clockwork, seeking iced coffee, shade, and conversation. I'd taken to preparing pitchers of sweet tea in advance, earning grateful smiles and bigger tips. Even in the heat, I found peace in the rhythm of it all. The cafe was becoming more than a job. It was a place where I was seen, where I mattered. Rosa had even given me a name tag that read Audrey, Heart of the House. I'd laughed when she gave it to me, but secretly I'd tucked it into my purse like a keepsake. Gregory's visits remained steady. Every weekend, like clockwork. Emma and I had started a little garden journal recording what we planted, when it bloomed, and her favorite part of the process. She drew stick figures and smiley suns in the margins. One afternoon, she gave me a picture of a flower with the words, "Grandma makes everything grow." I kept it on my fridge. Still, under the surface, tension lingered. Vanessa hadn't contacted me since the day in Brian's office. And though Gregory had opened up slightly, there were cracks in his voice sometimes, moments where he seemed on the verge of sharing something heavier but held back. I didn't push. Not yet. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was late Thursday evening. I'd just finished watering the garden and was folding laundry when my phone rang. Gregory. "Hey," I answered, noticing the tremble in my hand. "Mom, I need your help." His voice was ragged, panicked. "Emma's missing." Time froze. My knees buckled slightly, and I sank into the nearest chair. What happened? She was at the park with Vanessa. There was a crowd, someone set off fireworks, and Emma got scared. Vanessa lost sight of her. The police are searching, but I didn't know who else to call. "I'm coming," I said, grabbing my keys. The drive to the park was a blur. I don't remember the traffic lights or the turns. I just remember praying, over and over, "Please let her be safe." When I arrived, the area was swarming with people. Flashlights swept through bushes and trees. Officers were questioning bystanders. Gregory stood near a patrol car, his hands in his hair, looking like a man unraveling. "Gregory." He turned, relief flashing in his eyes. "They haven't found her yet. It's been over an hour." I wrapped my arms around him. "We'll find her." Then I did what I knew best. I went looking. Not frantically, but deliberately. I thought like Emma. Where would she go if she were scared? The garden. There was a small community garden 2 blocks from the park. I remembered her mentioning it weeks ago, how she loved the sunflowers and the fairy statue in the corner. I walked there quickly, flashlight steady, and there she was, curled up on the mulch beside the statue, tear-streaked but unharmed. "Emma!" She looked up, eyes wide. "Grandma?" I scooped her into my arms, sobbing with relief. "You're okay! You're okay!" "I got scared," she whispered. "I know, baby. You did the right thing, coming somewhere safe." Gregory's face crumpled when I returned with her. He took her in his arms, holding her like he might never let go. That night, after the police left and Emma was tucked into Gregory's apartment, he sat beside me on the porch steps. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "You always know what to do." "I just thought like her," I said softly. He nodded. "I never wanted it to be like this. You and me. The house. Everything." I looked at him. Really looked. "Then why did you let it happen?" He rubbed his face. "I was afraid. Of failing. Of Vanessa leaving. Of not being enough. And somewhere in all that, I forgot who you were to me. You forgot who I was to you. Or who you were to yourself." He blinked. "Both." We sat in silence. "Emma's what keeps me going now," he admitted. "But I don't want her to grow up thinking it's normal to treat people like we treated you. I don't want her to think love is transactional. It's not too late to show her something different." He looked at me then, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it." I reached over and took his hand. "I know, and I forgive you." We stayed like that for a long time. Later, as I drove home under the stars, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't just a gift I gave Gregory. It was a release I gave myself. And that release, that space, made room for something new. Hope. The days after Emma's asthma scare passed in a kind of calm I hadn't known in years. Something in the air felt softer, like the tension that had ruled our lives had cracked just enough to let a little light in. Gregory started calling again. Not every day, but enough to surprise me. Sometimes he'd text to ask how Emma was. Sometimes he'd even ask how I was. Vanessa didn't reach out. I didn't expect her to. At Rosie's cafe, the regulars noticed the shift in me. Maybe it was the way I moved lighter on my feet, or the way I stopped watching the door like I was waiting for a ghost to come through it. "You're glowing," Rosa said one morning as she handed me a cinnamon roll. "I think I'm just breathing easier," I told her. And it was true. For the first time in what felt like decades, I was beginning to feel like myself again, not someone's mother, not someone's shadow, but Audrey Wilson. Emma started spending weekends with me regularly. I didn't push. I let her take the lead. We baked muffins, read books under a blanket fort, and played in the garden. She asked questions about Richard, my late husband, curious about the grandfather she never met. "Did Grandpa have a beard?" she asked one night while brushing her doll's hair. "No, but he always smelled like pine trees and coffee." "Was he funny?" I smiled. He made me laugh every single day. That kind of remembering warmed me in ways I hadn't expected. Through Emma's curiosity, Richard came back to life in tiny flickers. One sunny Saturday, I was weeding the front flower bed when I heard a car pull up behind me. I turned and saw Gregory standing awkwardly on the sidewalk, holding a pair of gloves. "Need some help?" he asked. I hesitated. "If you don't mind getting dirty." He knelt beside me and we pulled weeds in silence for a while. The rhythm of the work was comforting. Familiar. "I talked to Vanessa," he said eventually, still focused on a stubborn dandelion root. "Oh?" "I told her I want shared custody when the baby comes. I want Emma to keep visiting you." That caught me off guard. I sat back on my heels. How did she take it? About as well as you'd expect. But I'm not backing down this time. I looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment, I saw not the boy I'd raised or the man who had hurt me, but someone caught between the two, trying to make something right. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. He glanced at me, his eyes a little glassy. "You know, I used to think you were invincible." "I wasn't," I admitted. "I just couldn't afford to fall apart." We finished the bed in silence. The sun was high, and the tulips Richard had planted years ago were beginning to bloom again, red and yellow and stubborn, just like him. That evening, Gregory stayed for dinner. I made pot roast the way Richard liked it, and Emma set the table with the good napkins. It felt almost like old times. Not quite, but something close. After we'd cleaned up, Gregory lingered in the kitchen while Emma watched cartoons in the other room. "I've started therapy," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Because of court?" "No," he smiled a little. "Because I want to figure out how I became someone who could put his mother in the garage." That hurt to hear. But it also healed something. A wound named recognition. "I'm glad," I said. And I meant it. Some bridges, I've learned, don't burn all at once. Sometimes they smolder. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they get rebuilt, one plank at a time. The weeks that followed took on a new rhythm. I worked mornings at Rosie's Taste. I tended my garden in the afternoons. Emma visited often, and sometimes Gregory would join. We were slowly finding our footing, this shaky new version of a family. One Thursday evening, I was sitting on the porch watching the fireflies when Emma came and crawled into my lap. "Mommy said you don't like her anymore," she said, her voice small. I stroked her hair, my throat tightening. "Sometimes grown-ups don't agree on things. But I still love you. That never changes." "Oh?" She nodded, as if she understood more than she could say. That night, I cried in the kitchen, not from sadness, but from a kind of tenderness I didn't know what to do with. The house, once echoing with betrayal and loss, had slowly begun to feel like home again. I repainted the kitchen cabinets myself, soft yellow, the color Richard always said made the mornings feel warmer. I hung our wedding photo back over the fireplace. I unpacked the last of the boxes Vanessa had labeled Mom's Stuff. End quote. One box held a stack of old Mother's Day cards from Gregory, drawn in crayon and full of misspelled declarations of love. I sat on the floor and read every one. The next weekend, Gregory showed up with a box of tools and offered to fix the squeaky step on the back porch. I let him. We didn't talk much while he worked. But when he finished, he handed me a glass of lemonade and sat beside me on the swing. "I don't think I'll ever deserve your forgiveness," he said. "That's not for you to decide," I told him gently. "But I can tell you this, I'm learning to let go of the past. Not because you earned it, but because I need peace more than I need payback." He nodded slowly, as if that made more sense than anything else. One evening, as I sat with Rosa after closing time, she asked, "Do you ever miss how things were?" I thought for a long time before answering. "I miss what I thought I had," I said, "but not what it really was. And now, I have something better, even if it's smaller." She nodded, her hand covering mine on the table. "You've come a long way." And I had. From a woman who stood in the rain beside her suitcases to a woman sitting in her own kitchen, sipping tea, surrounded by peace. What a journey. And I wasn't done yet. It started with a letter. Just a plain, cream-colored envelope wedged between a catalog and a pizza coupon in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. At first, I assumed it was junk mail, maybe another charity appeal. But something about the weight of it, how it didn't bend like a regular card, made me pause. I opened it right there, on the porch, with the sun just starting to warm the wood beneath my feet. Inside was a single, typed page. No salutation, no signature. But the words stopped me cold. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm writing to say something I should have said long ago. What happened to you wasn't right. I watched you get pushed aside. I knew about the garage. I knew you were still paying the mortgage. I even overheard them talking about selling the house while you were away. I said nothing. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." There was no name, no return address, just the truth. I stood frozen, the letter fluttering in my hand. A neighbor had seen me, really seen me. Not as a burden or a problem, but as a person. And while it didn't fix what had happened, it helped. It reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that the betrayal wasn't just in my head. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table Richard and I had picked out at a flea market 30 years ago, and wrote a letter of my own. It wasn't for Gregory or Vanessa, it was for me. I wrote about the house, how we'd saved for it, brick by brick, how I remembered picking out wallpaper for the nursery and planting tulips under the front window, how we'd laughed in this house, cried in it, how I lost Richard in it. Then I wrote about the moment I found my belongings on the sidewalk, about the hurt, the humiliation, and the decision to take my life back. I ended it with a single line. "I forgive you, but I won't forget who I am again." I didn't send it. I folded it and tucked it into the back of my journal. Maybe one day I'd give it to Gregory, or maybe I wouldn't. That wasn't the point. The point was I'd said it. Emma started visiting more often. Gregory dropped her off on Saturday mornings and picked her up Sunday evenings. No overnight bag, just her, running up the steps with her arms wide, yelling, "Grandma!" She didn't ask why she didn't see me at her house anymore. Children don't need explanations, they feel the truth. I let her pick flowers in the backyard, and we baked cookies and watched old movies together. Sometimes, she asked if we could call her grandfather in heaven to say goodnight. "I wish we could," I'd whisper, brushing her hair. One weekend, while stirring pancake batter, she looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, are you happy now?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You used to look sad, like the plants at school when we forget to water them." I laughed softly, and then I thought about it. Really thought. "I think I'm starting to be," I said. "I think I forgot how. But I'm learning again." She nodded. That made perfect sense to her. A few weeks later, on Christmas morning, there was a knock at the door. Gregory stood on the porch, Caleb sleeping in a carrier strapped to his chest. "Vanessa's exhausted," he said. "I thought maybe Emma could open some gifts here." And just like that, there were children's giggles in my living room again. I made cocoa and cinnamon rolls. Emma danced around in new slippers. Caleb burbled from his bouncer seat. Gregory didn't say much, but as he buckled the kids back into the car, he turned to me. "Thanks for still being here," he said almost under his breath. I just nodded. I never really left. I just remembered who I am. He drove away, and I stood in the doorway as snow began to fall. It wasn't heavy, just a soft, steady dusting that covered the garden, the porch, the swing, the kind of snow that quiets the world and gives you space to think. And I realized, this was the turning point. Not the legal victory, not moving back into the house, but that moment, standing in the doorway with snow in my hair and peace in my heart. I had stopped disappearing. I had started living again. That was the real win. That afternoon, Martha stopped by with leftover turkey and 2 mugs of cider. "You look different," she said as she stepped into the kitchen. "I feel different," I admitted. "It's like I remember how to breathe again," she smiled. "You're not done, you know." "What do you mean? You've taken your life back? Now you get to decide what to do with it." I nodded, her words sinking in. For years I'd shaped myself around other people's needs, their schedules, their demands, their comfort. Now, for the first time in decades, I could ask myself, what do I want? It started with small things. I put my name on the electric bill again. I painted the living room in the warm honey color Richard used to love. I adopted a scrappy little mutt from the shelter and named her Millie. I said yes when the library asked if I'd lead a memoir writing workshop. I'd always loved stories, maybe it was time to share mine. And every Sunday night, I wrote a letter. Not to anyone in particular, just a habit. I wrote about what I'd learned that week, what I'd remembered, what I hoped for. I folded each one and tucked it into a box on my nightstand. One day, maybe Emma would read them. Maybe she'd know that her grandmother was more than just the woman who made cookies and kissed skinned knees. She was someone who learned late, but not too late, that dignity isn't something you wait to be given. You claim it. You protect it. You live it. And that was exactly what I planned to keep doing. Because this time, I wasn't going back. Spring arrived slowly, like a shy guest hesitant to knock. The frost lingered longer than usual, but one morning in late March, I stepped out to find crocuses blooming defiantly near the porch steps. Tiny purple fists pushing through the earth. That's how it felt like life was inching back, one bloom at a time. Rosie's Cafe added an outdoor patio, and Rosa asked if I'd manage the new section. Me, a 60-year-old grandmother in charge of a crew of college kids. I laughed at the offer, but she wasn't joking. "You're the one they look up to," Rosa said, pouring me a cup of her famous cinnamon coffee. "You work harder than any of them, and they listen when you speak." I took the job. That first afternoon, as I directed table arrangements and helped carry umbrellas into place, I caught my reflection in the cafe window. Hair pinned up, apron smudged with flour, cheeks a little red from the breeze, but my eyes, they looked alive. Not just surviving, thriving. I never imagined I'd find myself at this point in life, starting over. But it wasn't a restart, it was a continuation, a rediscovery. At night, I'd sit on the porch with Millie curled at my feet, watching the stars blink awake. The old swing creaked beneath me, a familiar rhythm. Sometimes I'd think of Richard. I'd talk to him, tell him about the day, the cafe, the way Emma giggled when she beat me at Go Fish. "You'd love her," I'd whisper into the night. "She's got your stubborn streak." Emma came by almost every weekend now. Gregory dropped her off without Vanessa, who no longer made appearances. Our exchanges were polite, brief, but something had shifted. The venom was gone. Replaced by resignation, maybe? Or quiet recognition. He never apologized, not directly. But actions, as they say, speak louder. On one visit, Emma handed me a crayon drawing. It was of a house, bright yellow, with smoke curling from the chimney. In the window, a woman with silver hair held hands with a little girl. "That's you and me," she said. "And that's Millie." She pointed to a wobbly dog shape in the yard. I framed it, hung it in the hallway where our family portraits used to be. And then there was the library workshop. I was terrified the first day, more nervous than I'd been in decades. Standing at the front of that quiet room, a dozen expectant faces looking up at me, Notebooks open, pens poised. I'm not an expert, I began, my voice shaking slightly. But I've lived some stories, and maybe you have too. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. We started small, writing childhood memories, describing a favorite meal, a moment of regret. Week by week, walls came down. A widower wrote about losing his wife of 50 years. A retired nurse shared her journey from Vietnam to California. A quiet woman named Darlene finally spoke, revealing she hadn't written anything since her husband passed away until now. It wasn't just a workshop. It was healing. And I realized storytelling had always been my way through, even when no one was listening. One Thursday evening, after the workshop, I stopped at the grocery store. As I waited in line, a familiar voice behind me said, "Audrey?" I turned. It was Claire, Vanessa's mother. We hadn't spoken since the falling out. She looked thinner than I remembered, her smile brittle. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice low. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I blinked. For what? For not seeing it. For not standing up. I always thought Vanessa was, well, ambitious. But I didn't know it would come at your expense. I studied her face. There was something real in her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or something close enough. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." She nodded. "If you ever want to get coffee." I'd like that. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was another bloom pushing through the frost. By summer, the garden was in full glory. Tulips gave way to daisies. Daisies to roses. I found joy in dirt under my nails again, in coaxing life from forgotten corners of the yard. One hot July afternoon, Rosa threw a barbecue for the cafe staff and their families. Emma helped me bake peach cobbler, her arms dusted in flour. As people gathered in the backyard, I watched her play tag with the other kids. Laughter spilled over the fence into the quiet street beyond. Rosa raised a toast. "To Audrey," she said, clinking her glass. "For showing us all it's never too late to start again." Everyone cheered. I smiled, blinking back tears. After the crowd thinned and the fireflies came out, I sat alone on the porch swing, Emma asleep inside, Millie at my feet. And I thought, this is what rebuilding looks like. Not flashy, not dramatic, just honest, steady, sacred. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across the old hardwood floor. I stood in the kitchen, my kitchen again, watching the steam rise from a fresh cup of tea. The quiet was gentle, not lonely. It wrapped around me like an old quilt, patched with memory and comfort. It had been nearly 6 months since Gregory and Vanessa moved out. The legal process had been exhausting. There were moments I questioned myself, doubted whether I'd done the right thing. But every time I walked through these rooms filled with Richard's laugh, Emma's footsteps, and my own quiet prayers I knew I had. Sometimes, strength doesn't roar. Sometimes, it's the steady voice that whispers, "Keep going." And I had. Emma visited often now. Vanessa kept her distance, but she no longer interfered. Gregory? We were still figuring it out. There were awkward conversations, guarded moments, but also glimmers of something else, a tentative respect, perhaps, or at least understanding. One evening in late August, after Emma had gone home, I sat on the porch swing with my Bible open on my lap. Not because I was looking for answers, but because I needed to sit with something older, wiser than myself. My fingers found the page without thinking. "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified, for the Lord your God goes with you." I read the verse aloud, slowly. Richard used to say that faith wasn't always about church pews and Sunday suits. Sometimes it was getting up again when the world knocked you down, trusting that you were held, even when no one else seemed to see you. He was right. This chapter of my life hadn't begun with a celebration. It began with 4 suitcases on a sidewalk and a note that told me I didn't belong. But somewhere between the heartbreak and the healing, I found something more valuable than approval or comfort. I found courage. I found the woman I had buried under years of sacrifice and silence. I found Audrey. Now when I see my reflection, I don't just see silver hair or softened skin. I see a survivor, a woman who reclaimed her place, who stopped apologizing for existing, who learned finally to treat herself with the same love she had always offered others. The doorbell rang. It was Martha, of course, carrying fresh tomatoes from her garden and a pie that somehow never made it to the oven in one piece. "I thought I'd drop these off before the heat wilts them," she said, stepping inside. "And you looked like you could use company." "I always could," I smiled. We sat in the living room, two women who had weathered storms, shared laughter and loss, and come out stronger. "You know," Martha said, sipping her lemonade, "I used to think getting older meant getting smaller, quieter, fading into the background. But it doesn't have to," I said. She nodded. "You reminded me of that." We didn't speak for a while, just listened to the wind rustling the trees and the soft clink of ice in our glasses. It was enough. Later, after she left, I walked through the house, turning off the lights. In the hallway, I paused before the small framed drawing Emma had given me months ago, the yellow house with smoke curling from the chimney. The two figures in the window still held hands. I touched the glass lightly. "This is still home," I whispered. Not because of the bricks or the mortgage or even the memories, but because I chose to stay. I chose to stand. I chose to believe that no matter how dark it got, I wasn't alone and I never had been. There are battles we fight quietly, ones no one sees, but they shape us just the same. And sometimes, the greatest strength is simply refusing to be erased. You don't have to raise your voice to prove your strength. You don't have to be young to begin again. Sometimes, the greatest courage comes from the quiet choices, the ones where you reclaim your voice, your worth, and your name. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a heartache, or maybe a strength you thought was long gone, share it in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear what you've lived through. And if stories like this speak to your soul, don't forget to subscribe. There's still so much beauty waiting ahead.